A reading from the Gospel according to Matthew, 2nd chapter. In the time of Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is this child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, Herod inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the Magi and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you found him, bring me word that I may also go and pay homage to him." When they had heard the king, they set out, and out there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, the Magi offered the child gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
When things come in threes, I pay attention. Here's an example. 3 people in my life in 3 different contexts on 3 separate occasions have recently told me about a novel. It's called The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store. It's by James McBride, and it was published last year. So I've paid attention, and I added the title to my reading list. Here's another example. God, Jesus, Spirit, also known as the Holy Trinity. It's important to pay attention to that trio, each one of them and all 3 of them together throughout our whole life, the Trinity. And here's one more example, the 3 gifts that the Magi bring: gold, frankincense, myrrh. And the gifts are in a particular order, aren't they? They didn't bring myrrh, frankincense, and gold. The Magi brought, now say it with me, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. That is the order that we know from this story in Matthew's Gospel. And the Magi's gifts, they're wonderfully memorable, but not very practical. Like, why would you give myrrh to a baby? How about a cloth burpee? How about a cute onesie? How about, an intercom system so Mary and Joseph can listen to the baby when they step away from the manger? Well, let's take our time with each one of the gifts. First, we have the gift of gold. In ancient Israel, gold was of great value, and it is, of course, still valuable today. It was a financial gift, a tangible offering, a thing of value given freely. Second, we have the gift of frankincense. Frankincense is an aromatic resin. It comes from the trunk of the boswellia tree, which grows in the Arabian Peninsula and the Horn of Africa. And the frankincense resin is used as a fragrance in soaps and lotions and perfumes. And third is the gift of myrrh. Myrrh is also a tree resin, however, it is extracted by force. Myrrh is harvested by repeatedly wounding the bark of a certain tree, And then the wounds secrete a gum, which is waxy, and then that gum coagulates quickly and becomes hard and glossy. And in ancient cultures, the myrrh, the hard resin, was used medicinally as a pain reliever, or as an embalming oil, or it was burned as incense. There have been many interpretations of the meaning of the Magi's three gifts. Some suggest that the gold was a symbol of royalty. Jesus' birth was the beginning of a new kind of kingship, a kingship of spiritual wealth and spiritual power. Some suggest that the frankincense was a symbol of deity. Jesus was the Messiah, the anointed one. Some suggest that the myrrh was a symbol of death, a foreshadowing of Jesus' crucifixion. Dorothy Day, the American Catholic social activist, wrote about the Magi's gifts in another way. So listen, please, to part of what Dorothy Day wrote. In Christ's human life, there were always a few people who made up for the neglect of the crowd. The Magi did it. Their journey across the world made up for those who refused to stir one hand's breadth from the routine of their lives to go to the Christ. Even the gifts the wise ones brought have in themselves an obscure recompense for what would follow later in Jesus' life. For they brought gold, the king's emblem, to make up for the crown of thorns that he would wear. And they offered incense, the symbol of praise, to make up for the mockery and the spitting. They gave him myrrh to heal and soothe as he was wounded from head to foot. And Dorothy Day concludes, we can do it too. We are not born too late. We can do it by seeing Christ and serving Christ in friends and strangers, in everyone we come in contact with. I think what Dorothy Day is saying is that we cannot sit this one out. We cannot wait for someone else to do it. We ought not be part of the neglect of the crowd. Figuring that somebody else will see Christ and serve Christ is not a faithful response to the gospel. We must carry the Christ light into our circles of connection, our places of influence, our homes, our families, our workplaces, our schools, our neighborhoods, our libraries, our grocery stores. We must carry the Christ light. And I also think that Dorothy Day is saying that holding fast to the Christ light, to the star light of Epiphany, it's going to be hard sometimes. It often may be really, really hard. And that brings me to one more example of three things. Last Sunday was December 31st. We had an informal worship service up here on the chancel. 38 of us gathered, and we sang and passed the peace and prayed. And instead of preaching a sermon, I invited folks to consider the hinge that we were on, the hinge, New Year's Eve, the tipping point between 2023 and 2024, saying goodbye to last year and stepping into a new year. After a time of small group sharing about gratitude, we returned to the whole large group, and I asked people to recite with me the first stanza of the Christmas carol, O Little Town of Bethlehem. Remember how it ends? The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight. And so I asked those folks to ponder a hope and a fear that they have for 2024. One fear in particular, one worry, one deep concern was spoken aloud several times. And that was the political culture and anticipating the 2024 presidential election. That was thing number one. The second thing happened in Adam Blonz's living room. Adam Blonz is the lead minister at McAllister Plymouth Church in St. Paul. and he hosts our monthly clergy gathering. There are 6 of us, UCC Metro clergy, who gather together on the first Wednesday of the month. So this past Wednesday, our conversation turned to the season of Lent and the topic of anxiety. Specifically, anxiety about the current cultural and political realities. They're not new, we're so exhausted by them, and yet they continue. So how do we navigate this time with our parishioners? Should the church be a place of refuge and comfort? Or should the church be a place of activism and challenge? Yes, yes. And what can any of us do that will make a real difference? How do we stay true to our progressive Christian convictions at this perilous time? What are we willing to risk? How do we not succumb to immobilizing despair? What will the leadership of the national UCC encourage us to do? How do we love our neighbor through it all? And how do we build in time to rest in God's abiding presence? And how do we equip our flocks to do the same? That's what we clergy people talk about when we get together. It was a valuable conversation, and of course, there were no easy answers. The third instance was also on this past Wednesday at the Church Center on Franklin Avenue in Minneapolis. That's where the Minnesota Conference UCC has its offices. And I gathered there with the conference staff and members of the board of directors. I'm on the board of directors, and I also served on the search committee to call a new transitional conference minister. And Wednesday was the meet and greet with the candidate. So there were 15 of us in a room, and our conference moderator, the Reverend Sarah Morse, asked us to introduce ourselves and then to include a hope and a concern that we have for the conference during this time of transition. Once again, people named their angst about the political divide and the impending primary and general elections, especially for local church pastors and chaplains who serve in greater Minnesota, where political divides are more pronounced. What kind of support will the conference provide? So between last Sunday's worship service and my clergy clutch and the conference meeting, believe me, I got the message. Now, none of it surprised me, of course. I feel the gravitas of what's at stake this year, too. But these 3 experiences came in such quick succession that it really gave me pause. How do we, as people of faith, keep the faith? I have 3 ideas. 3. Here they are. 1, name it. We gotta name the dread, the outrage, the worry, whatever it is that we feel. Name it, face it, feel it. 2, engage and then disengage. Consume the news, but do not be consumed by the news. Figure out the tipping point for yourself, how to be an informed citizen, an engaged citizen without severely depleting your ability to function or to enjoy life. So figure out when to turn off the radio, when to put down the smartphone, when to walk away from the screen or stop reading. Experiment with your own unique resilience, your ability to meet and learn from and not be crushed by the challenges and stresses of this time. And 3, call on your spiritual resources. Now is the time, people. Now is the time for the Bible, prayer, meditation, worship, service, activism, compassion, trust, love, and community, community, community. Now we're going to put into practice what I just said. We're going to conclude the sermon together in community. So please, right now, would you stand up? Now take a hymnal. Put your worship folder or anything else in your hands down. Leave your pew and form a circle in the outer aisles of the sanctuary. So nobody in the middle, but in the outer aisles. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Now look at each other. These are your people. These are your peeps. You are part of God's beloved community right here. And those of you on Zoom, we don't forget you, we remember you. If you can see the monitor, look up and see them. Wave. Yes. We are not alone. We are in community and we hold one another in our hopes and in our fears. The Magi in this morning's reading from Matthew see the star and follow the star. You see the star above Dusty? There it is. It's lit. It's illumined. And the star points them to Jesus, not only to the infant Jesus, but to the way of Jesus, the path of Jesus, the incarnation of God with us. And so the Magi bow down and worship him and give their gifts. And the star is their talisman. So, I'm going to give each of you a star. More specifically, a star word for the year ahead. And if a year seems too long, at least carry your star word for the season of Epiphany, which is about 5.5 weeks. I cut out 100 stars yesterday, and I wrote a different word on each one. No two stars are alike, and they're all face down in a little basket, so you don't know what word you're going to get. The word is going to choose you. You are not choosing your word. Okay? So I'll start and would pass to your neighbor. Take one star out of the basket, pass the basket to your neighbor. Now you may or may not like your word. But it is your star word. And my prayer is that you are willing to find out what it evokes or illumines for you. So, here goes. Those of you in the back, it's coming. Your star word is coming. Maybe your word this year is patience. So continue to look at one another. These are your people. We are here together. We are not alone. Okay, Melanie, let's sing.